I'm Laverne Parker, 62 years old, and I've spent my life building both a successful catering business and raising my son Michael as a widow. We were inseparable until he met Kimberly. For his happiness, I agreed to fund their extravagant wedding entirely. But at the reception, as I approached to congratulate them, Kimberly turned to me with cold eyes and shouted, "You're not welcome here, go away." The room fell silent. My own son just stood there. I'd love to know where you're watching from today. If you're curious about what I did next, hit that like button and subscribe now. Trust me, you won't believe what happened within the next hour. The day I held Michael in my arms for the first time, I promised him the world. It was a promise I intended to keep even after his father Thomas was diagnosed with aggressive pancreatic cancer when Michael was just 8 years old. For 2 years, our family fought alongside Thomas through treatments and hospital stays. Michael would sit beside his father's bed reading comic books aloud while I handled hospital paperwork and tried to keep our fledgling catering business afloat. When Thomas passed away, Michael was 10. At his funeral, my little boy stood straight-backed in his too large suit, trying so hard to be the man of the house. That night, as I tucked him in, he asked, "Are we going to be okay, Mom?" With tears in my eyes, but determination in my heart, I told him, "Yes, sweetheart, I promise." Keeping that promise meant working 16-hour days. I'd wake at 4 a.m. to prep for morning corporate breakfasts, drop Michael at school, cater lunch events, pick him up, help with homework, then prepare for the next day while he slept. My small catering company, Laverne's Home Flavors, became known for reliable service and delicious food made with love. I built my client base one satisfied customer at a time. There were sacrifices. I missed a contract with a major hotel chain because it conflicted with Michael's middle school graduation. I turned down destination wedding opportunities because I couldn't bear to leave him for days with relatives. Every extra dollar went into a college fund for him. Michael was worth every sacrifice. He was a thoughtful child who grew into a compassionate teenager. When he was 14, I found him helping our elderly neighbor Mrs. Grantham with her groceries. At 16, he worked alongside me during summer breaks, learning the value of hard work while helping with simple food prep and serving. One day, he'd say, "You'll retire, and I'll take over the business." Though I never expected that to happen, Michael had different talents. His willingness to share my dreams touched me deeply. We had our traditions. Sunday mornings were sacred. We'd make Belgian waffles together while dancing to Thomas's old vinyl records. For his birthday each year, I'd recreate the exact chocolate cake with peanut butter frosting that Thomas used to make him. When Michael got his driver's license, we took a road trip to the Grand Canyon, just the two of us in our old station wagon, singing off-key to radio hits and stopping at every quirky roadside attraction. Our small house was filled with love and laughter. There were hard times too, of course. The year the kitchen flooded, and I nearly lost the business. Michael's broken arm from a skateboarding accident that insurance barely covered. The rebellious period when he was 17 and started hanging out with kids I didn't trust. But we weathered each storm together, emerging stronger. Michael excelled academically, and when acceptance letters from colleges arrived, I felt both immense pride and quiet panic about the costs. The letter from Westlake University, his dream school, came with a partial scholarship, but would still require tens of thousands of dollars. That night, after Michael had gone to bed, I sat at our kitchen table with my calculator and bank statements, trying to make the impossible math work. The next morning, I walked into the bank and took out a second mortgage on our home. When I told Michael he could attend Westlake, his joyful tears mirrored my own. "I'll pay you back every penny, Mom," he promised. "You don't have to," I told him. "Just make the most of this opportunity." And he did. Michael thrived at Westlake studying finance and economics. He joined the investment club, secured prestigious internships, and graduated with honors. I worked extra events and expanded the business to corporate retreats to make the loan payments. When I drove to his graduation ceremony in my catering van because my car had broken down, Michael proudly introduced me to his professors and friends, his arm around my shoulders. After graduation, Michael landed a job at a respected financial firm in the city. His starting salary was more than I'd ever made in a year. He insisted on helping me pay off the remainder of his college loans despite my protests. "You've carried me long enough, Mom," he said. "It's my turn to help now." Even as his career took off, we remained close. Sunday dinners became our new tradition. Sometimes he'd come to me, other times I'd drive to his sleek city apartment. He'd tell me about his work, his friends, his dreams for the future. I'd share stories about my latest catering triumphs and challenges. The catering business was finally thriving, and I'd even hired several full-time employees. Then came the Sunday when Michael called to cancel dinner. "Rain check, Mom. I just met someone amazing, and we've got tickets to a show tonight." I heard the excitement in his voice and encouraged him to enjoy his date. Little did I know how that one cancellation would spiral into the beginning of the end of the relationship we'd built over 28 years. 2 weeks later, Michael brought Kimberly to Sunday dinner at my house. She was undeniably beautiful, tall and slender, with perfectly highlighted hair and designer clothes that made my living room look shabby by comparison. She brought an expensive bottle of wine and complimented my home with well-practiced politeness, but something about her smile never quite reached her eyes. "Michael tells me you're a caterer," she said in a tone that somehow made my career sound like a charming hobby. "That must be so fun making little sandwiches and things." "Mom's business does events for some of the biggest companies in the state," Michael jumped in proudly. "She built it from nothing." Kimberly nodded with what seemed like genuine interest, but then steered the conversation to her own background, her father's investment firm, her shopping trip to Paris, her sorority connections that had landed her a marketing position at a luxury brand. As I served the pot roast I'd spent hours preparing, I noticed how Kimberly merely picked at her food. "This is delicious, Mrs. Parker," she said, having taken perhaps 2 small bites. "So homey and traditional." Throughout dinner, I tried to connect with her, asking about her family, her interests, her work. Her answers were polite but brief, always circling back to Michael. How they met at a charity gala, how she was helping him upgrade his wardrobe, how she was introducing him to the right people who could advance his career. When they left that evening, Michael hugged me tightly. "Isn't she amazing, Mom?" he whispered. I nodded and smiled, not trusting myself to speak the reservations already forming in my mind. Over the next few months, I saw less and less of my son. Sunday dinners became monthly, then sporadic. When we did meet, Kimberly was always present, her hand possessively on Michael's arm. He began to change, subtle shifts at first. New expensive clothes, different haircut, new opinions on politics and social issues that echoed Kimberly's casual remarks from previous conversations. After just 6 months of dating, Michael announced their engagement over text message, not even a phone call. I had to hear the details when they finally came for dinner the following weekend. Kimberly flashed her enormous diamond ring, just over 3 carats, she informed me, and launched into wedding plans already well underway. "We're thinking June at the Westbrook estate," she said. "They rarely open for weddings, but Daddy plays golf with the owner." "June," I echoed, calculating quickly. "But that's only 4 months away." "When you know," Michael said, squeezing Kimberly's hand. I took a deep breath. "Well, I'd like to contribute to the wedding costs," I offered. "I've been saving for your future for years." Kimberly's eyes lit up for the first time that evening. "That's so sweet. Actually, we've been putting together the budget. I can email you the spreadsheet." The spreadsheet arrived the next day. I nearly choked on my coffee when I saw the total $175,000 for one day. The venue alone was $40,000, the flowers $15,000, the dress $12,000. I called Michael immediately. "Honey, this budget, it's more than I cleared in profit last year." "I know it's a lot, Mom," he said, sounding uncomfortable. "But Kimberly has her heart set on a certain kind of wedding. Her parents are contributing too." His voice dropped slightly. "Actually, they're having some cash flow problems with their investment firm right now, so they're only handling the rehearsal dinner." Over the next few days, I reviewed my finances, spoke with my financial advisor, and made a decision. I had substantial equity in my home and business. The catering company was doing well. I had planned to use my savings for eventual retirement, but what was the point of saving if not for important moments in my son's life? I called Michael back. "I'll cover the wedding," I said. "Really?" His voice brightened with surprise and relief. "All of it." "Yes," I confirmed. "All of it. I just have 2 requests. I'd like to cater the rehearsal dinner as my gift, and I'd like to be included in some of the planning." "Of course," Michael exclaimed. "Mom, you're the best. I'll tell Kimberly right away." But my inclusion in the planning never materialized. Every suggestion I made was politely dismissed. When I offered to cater the rehearsal dinner, Kimberly explained that her parents had already selected a Michelin-starred restaurant. "But maybe your staff could help with the wedding brunch," she suggested, as if offering a consolation prize. The guest list became another source of tension. My modest suggestion of 15 guests from my side was met with resistance. "The venue has strict capacity limits," Kimberly explained, "and we need to prioritize people who are active in our current lives." Translation: My cousins from Oklahoma and my deceased husband's brother didn't make the cut, but all of Kimberly's sorority sisters and her parents' business associates did. When the invitations went out, I discovered my name was nowhere on them. Traditionally, wedding invitations indicated who was hosting, typically the parents. Since I was funding the entire event, I had assumed my name would be included. Instead, the invitation simply stated, "Together with their families, Kimberly Elizabeth Dawson and Michael Thomas Parker request the pleasure of your company." "It's just cleaner this way," Kimberly explained when I inquired. "Modern couples don't usually list parents on invitations anymore." Yet another tradition discarded for convenience. The wedding planning continued at breakneck speed, with costs somehow always exceeding the already extravagant budget. Additional rentals that weren't initially included, upgraded linens, premium bar package. Each time Michael would call apologetic but insistent. "Kimberly really has her heart set on this, Mom. I'm sorry about the extra cost." Through it all, I kept writing checks, transferring money, providing my credit card information to vendors. I set up payment plans with the major vendors, the venue, the caterer, the photographer, spreading the enormous cost over several months with final payments due the week of the wedding. The Thursday before the wedding weekend, the rehearsal dinner took place at Le Cristal, the Michelin-starred restaurant Kimberly's parents had selected. Despite funding the entire wedding, I wasn't involved in planning this event and arrived as just another guest. I was seated at a table far from the bride and groom, with distant relatives of Kimberly's I'd never met. As I watched Michael across the room surrounded by Kimberly's family and friends, I barely recognized my own son. He laughed at jokes I couldn't hear, raised glasses in toasts I wasn't part of. When Kimberly's father stood to give a speech about welcoming Michael into their family, he never once acknowledged the family that had raised him. Later that evening, I approached Michael to give him a small gift, his father's cufflinks, which Thomas had worn on our wedding day. "I thought you might like to have something of your dad's with you tomorrow," I said, pressing the small box into his hands. Before Michael could respond, Kimberly appeared at his side. "What's this?" she asked, opening the box without waiting for an answer. She examined the simple gold cufflinks with barely concealed disappointment. "They were my father's," Michael explained, "from his wedding day." "Oh," Kimberly said flatly. "That's nice, but we've already coordinated all the accessories with the photographer. You're wearing the pearl cufflinks that match my earrings, remember?" I saw the conflict on Michael's face, the desire to please his bride-to-be, warring with the connection to his father's memory. "Maybe just keep them in your pocket then," I suggested, as something old. "We're actually not doing those traditional superstitions," Kimberly interjected. "Our wedding planner has created a more elevated approach." As she led Michael away, I stood alone, the weight of invisibility pressing down on me. I had never felt so disconnected from my own son. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear. Despite the growing tensions, I woke with genuine excitement. Whatever my feelings about Kimberly and the extravagance of the event, this was still my only child's wedding day. I had arranged for my hair and makeup to be done professionally, a rare indulgence. My navy blue mother-of-the-groom dress had been carefully selected and altered to fit perfectly. Around my neck hung the pearl pendant Thomas had given me on our 10th anniversary, my way of keeping him present for this milestone he should have shared. Traditionally, the mother of the groom would have been at the venue early, helping with last-minute details, or simply being present for her son. But when I had offered to come to the hotel where Michael was getting ready, he had gently suggested it might be easier if I just arrived for the ceremony like the other guests. So I drove myself to the Westbrook Estate, an elegant, historic mansion with manicured gardens where the ceremony would take place. The venue was even more spectacular than the pictures with white roses and hydrangeas adorning every surface. Crystal chandeliers had been hung from trees lining the garden path. A string quartet played softly as guests in designer attire mingled on the lawn. I was directed to my seat in the front row on the groom's side, which was noticeably less populated than the bride's section. As I waited for the ceremony to begin, I tried to make conversation with the elegantly dressed couple next to me who introduced themselves as friends of Kimberly's family. When I mentioned I was the groom's mother, they seemed surprised. "Oh, we thought, well, with all this..." The woman gestured at the opulent surroundings, leaving the implication hanging that such luxury couldn't possibly have come from my side. Before I could respond, the music changed and the ceremony began. Despite everything, tears filled my eyes as Michael appeared at the altar, handsome in his tailored tuxedo. When Kimberly walked down the aisle on her father's arm, even I had to admit she looked stunning in her couture gown. The ceremony was brief and modern, with personalized vows that made no mention of family or tradition. Still, when the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, I applauded as enthusiastically as anyone genuinely happy to see the joy on my son's face. It was during the reception that everything fell apart. The cocktail hour was held on the terrace where champagne flowed freely and servers circulated with delicate hors d'oeuvres. I stood somewhat awkwardly alone as I knew few people there. Michael was constantly surrounded by Kimberly's friends and family, barely visible across the crowded space. When we moved into the grand ballroom for dinner, I discovered I had been seated not at the family table near the couple, but at a table near the back with distant acquaintances. Kimberly's parents, grandparents, and even her college roommate occupied the prime seats close to the head table. I swallowed my hurt and made pleasant conversation with my table mates, who were kind but clearly curious about my relegation to the social sidelines. Throughout the elaborate 5-course meal that I had paid for, but had no input in selecting, I watched as various members of Kimberly's family took the microphone for speeches and toasts. No one from my side was invited to speak. After dinner, determined to have at least one special moment with my son, I approached the head table during a brief moment when Kimberly was surrounded by her bridesmaids. I carried a small envelope containing a heartfelt letter and the deed to my vacation cabin in the mountains, a property I had purchased years ago as an investment that I had planned to give Michael as a wedding gift. "Michael, sweetie, I haven't had a chance to really talk to you today," I said, touching his arm gently. "I wanted to give you your wedding gift." Michael smiled, the first genuine smile he'd directed at me all day. "Thanks, Mom. Sorry it's been so crazy. You look beautiful, by the way." As he took the envelope, Kimberly suddenly appeared beside him, her expression shifting from radiant bride to cold displeasure in an instant. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice carrying in a way that drew attention from nearby guests. "Mom was just giving us our wedding gift," Michael explained. Kimberly took the envelope from his hands before he could open it. "We're about to cut the cake. The photographer is waiting. This isn't the time." "It will just take a moment," I said, keeping my voice level. "I wanted to explain what it is." "You're always doing this," Kimberly said, her voice rising. "Always trying to insert yourself and make things about you." I was stunned. "I don't understand. I just wanted to give my son a wedding gift." "No, you wanted attention. You've been sulking all night because you're not the center of attention." Her voice grew louder, drawing more stares. "This is our day, not yours." "Kimberly, please," Michael murmured, looking uncomfortable. "Let's not do this now." "No, I'm tired of tiptoeing around her feelings." Kimberly continued, her carefully cultivated image slipping to reveal something ugly beneath. "You're not welcome here. Go away." The room fell silent. Hundreds of eyes turned toward us. I stood frozen, unable to process the public humiliation. I looked at Michael, waiting for him to defend me, to say anything. But he just stood there, his eyes downcast, silent. In that moment, something broke inside me. Not just my heart for the loss of the relationship I thought I had with my son, but something deeper, the illusion that my sacrifices and love would always be recognized and respected. "I see," I said quietly. Then, with as much dignity as I could muster, I turned and walked out of the ballroom past the whispers and stares out of the venue and to my car. As I sat behind the wheel, shaking with shock and hurt, my phone buzzed with a text from the wedding planner, Mrs. Parker, the vendor for the midnight fireworks display, needs the final payment processed immediately. Can you approve the charge? I stared at the phone, a strange calm, suddenly replacing the storm of emotions. I had funded this entire spectacle, every flower, every candle, every bite of the 5-course meal currently being digested by people who had just witnessed my humiliation. And many of the vendors still had final payments pending, scheduled to process automatically from my accounts over the next few hours as services were delivered. My finger hovered over the banking app on my phone. I thought of Michael's face as he stood silently beside his bride while she publicly ejected his mother from their wedding. I thought of the second mortgage, the depleted retirement account, the hours of overtime I'd worked to give him this day, and I made my decision. The drive from the Westbrook estate to a small coffee shop downtown took exactly 22 minutes. In that time, my shock crystallized into resolve. I wasn't acting out of pure revenge, though I can't deny satisfaction played a role. I was finally standing up for myself after months of being dismissed, disrespected, and taken for granted. As I pulled into the coffee shop parking lot, memories cascaded through my mind. Michael's 5th birthday, when I'd worked a catering event until 2 a.m., then stayed up another 3 hours making his dinosaur cake. The night I'd held him through his first heartbreak at 16, assuring him better days would come. The second job I'd taken to afford his college application fees. All the love poured into raising him alone after Thomas died. And now the image of him standing silent while his new wife publicly humiliated me. My sister Eleanor called as I was parking. She'd been at the wedding and had witnessed everything. "Laverne, are you okay? That was horrible. Where are you?" "I'm fine," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "Just need some time to think." "Kimberly is a monster," Eleanor declared. "And Michael, I can't believe he just stood there." As Eleanor vented her outrage, a realization was forming in my mind. Kimberly had never wanted me there, had never wanted my input or presence. What she had wanted was my checkbook, the way she'd dismissed the sentimental value of family heirlooms in favor of photogenic aesthetics, how she'd excluded me from every decision while constantly expanding the budget. "Ellie, I need to go," I interrupted. "I'll call you back." Inside the coffee shop, I ordered a cappuccino and sat in a quiet corner booth. I opened my banking app and reviewed the pending transactions. The venue's final payment of $20,000. The photographer's remaining balance of $7,500. The band, the florist, the rental company, the lighting specialists, the fireworks display, all with substantial final payments scheduled to process automatically over the next few hours. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the screen. Was I really considering this? Would it make me as petty and vindictive as Kimberly? Then my phone chimed with a text message. It was from Ashley, Kimberly's maid of honor, but clearly meant for someone else. "OMG, can you believe Michael's mom's face when Kim told her off? Pathetic. At least the old lady paid for an open bar, lol." It had been sent to me by mistake, and it made my decision very simple. One by one, I logged into each vendor account and canceled the pending payments. For the venue, I called the after-hours emergency line and spoke to the manager on duty. "This is Laverne Parker, mother of the groom for the Dawson Parker wedding tonight. I need to inform you that the final payment will not be processed as planned." "Mrs. Parker, is there a problem with the service?" the manager asked, confused. "No, the service has been impeccable," I assured him. "Unfortunately, I've been asked to leave the wedding by the bride, so I will no longer be covering the remaining costs as previously arranged." After a stunned silence, the manager said he would need to speak with the on-site coordinator immediately. "There will be a substantial balance due," he warned. "Yes, I understand. Please direct all payment inquiries to the bride and groom or the bride's parents." I made similar calls to the other major vendors, explaining the situation calmly and professionally. Some were sympathetic, others strictly businesslike. All understood that final payments would not be coming from me. Finally, I sent a text to Michael. "I have canceled all remaining vendor payments. I cannot in good conscience continue to fund an event where I am not welcome. You and Kimberly will need to make other arrangements for the outstanding balances. I love you, but I deserve better than what happened tonight." Then I turned off my phone, put it in my purse, and drove to Eleanor's house. My sister opened the door in her bathrobe, having left the wedding shortly after I did. Her eyes widened when she saw my composed expression. "What did you do?" she asked, knowing me too well. "I stopped payment on everything that hadn't already been processed," I said, stepping inside. "About $60,000 worth." Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth. "Laverne, they're going to freak out." "Probably," I agreed, suddenly feeling exhausted. "But I'm done being Kimberly's ATM and Michael's doormat." Eleanor poured us both a generous glass of wine. "What happens now?" "Now we wait," I said, taking a long sip. "And I try to come to terms with the fact that I might have just lost my son forever." Despite my outward calm, that reality hit me like a physical blow. I might have just destroyed any chance of a relationship with Michael going forward. The thought was almost unbearable. But as I sat in Eleanor's living room, I realized I had reached a breaking point. Years of putting Michael first had culminated in a moment where he couldn't even stand up for me when I needed him most. Reports from the wedding began filtering in via Eleanor's phone. Her daughter Jessica, who had remained at the reception, sent updates. Vendors were approaching the bride and groom with payment issues. Kimberly was having what Jessica described as a nuclear meltdown. The expensive champagne for the midnight toast hadn't been delivered because the final payment hadn't cleared. The band was threatening to pack up early. I felt no joy in these reports, only a hollow vindication and deep sadness for what should have been one of the happiest days of my son's life. But I couldn't bring myself to regret my decision. For perhaps the first time since Thomas died, I had put myself first. My dignity, my self-respect, my financial security. Eleanor made up her guest room for me, and I spent a restless night there alternating between doubt, resolve, and grief. By morning, my phone had hundreds of notifications, missed calls, voicemails, texts. Most were from Michael, growing increasingly desperate and angry. Some were from Kimberly's parents threatening legal action. A few were from friends who had been at the wedding, expressing either support or dismay at the dramatic scene that had unfolded. I wasn't ready to deal with any of it. Instead, I accepted Eleanor's offer of breakfast and tried to prepare myself for whatever would come next. I didn't have to wait long. Shortly after 10 a.m., Michael's car screeched into Eleanor's driveway. I watched through the window as he slammed the door and stormed up to the house, still wearing his rumpled tuxedo pants and a wrinkled dress shirt. Eleanor answered the door. "She's in the kitchen," I heard her say. "But if you're here to yell at her, you can turn right around." Michael appeared in the doorway, his face a mask of fury and exhaustion. His hair was disheveled, his eyes bloodshot. He looked nothing like the joyful groom of the previous afternoon. "How could you?" he demanded without preamble. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I set down my coffee cup carefully. "I think I do. I stopped financially supporting an event where I was publicly humiliated and unwelcome." "You ruined our wedding," he shouted. "The fireworks never happened. The band left early. We had to put thousands on Kimberly's credit card just to keep the venue from kicking everyone out." "I'm sorry it came to that," I said quietly. "But I'm not sorry I stood up for myself." "This wasn't about you." Michael slammed his hand on the table. "It was our wedding day. A wedding day I paid for," I reminded him. "Every flower, every candle, every bite of food. And yet I was seated at the back of the room, excluded from family photos, and then publicly told to leave by your wife while you stood by and said nothing." Kimberly was stressed. She didn't mean it the way it sounded. I looked at my son, really looked at him. Yes, she did. And we both know it. She's been pushing me out since the day you met. I've tried so hard to be supportive, to not be the stereotype of the interfering mother-in-law. I've bitten my tongue, written checks, and made myself small to avoid rocking the boat. And where did it get me? Michael ran his hands through his hair in frustration. "So this was revenge punishment?" "No," I said firmly. "This was a consequence, something you and Kimberly seem to think you're exempt from. Kimberly's parents are talking about suing you for breach of contract." I had anticipated this. There is no contract with them. All agreements were between me and the vendors, and I made no legal commitment to cover costs if I was ejected from the event. Their lawyer is welcome to call mine." Michael's anger seemed to deflate, somewhat replaced by a desperate pleading. "Mom, please, just pay the remaining balances. We can work through the other stuff later." I shook my head slowly. "No, Michael, that's not how this works. I'm not an unlimited resource to be tapped whenever you want something, then put back on the shelf when I'm inconvenient. I'm your mother. I deserve respect, consideration, and basic human kindness. When you and Kimberly are ready to offer, that we can talk about rebuilding our relationship. Until then, you'll need to figure out your financial obligations on your own." He stared at me as if seeing me for the first time, not as his self-sacrificing mother, but as a woman with her own dignity and boundaries. Then his expression hardened again. "Fine, if that's how you want it. But don't expect to be part of our lives going forward. You've made your choice." As he turned to leave, I called after him, my voice breaking slightly. "I love you, Michael. I always will. When you're ready to talk, really talk, I'll be here." He didn't respond, just walked out, slamming the door behind him. Eleanor came into the kitchen and wordlessly put her arms around me as I finally allowed myself to cry. Not delicate tears, but deep, body-shaking sobs for all that had been lost. The son I had raised, the relationship I had treasured, the future I had imagined with grandchildren and family holidays, all gone in a single evening of cruelty and silence. The weeks following the wedding were some of the most difficult of my life, second only to the dark days after Thomas died. The threatened lawsuit from Kimberly's parents never materialized, likely because their lawyer advised them they had no legal standing. Instead, they waged a social campaign against me, telling anyone who would listen about the spiteful mother-in-law who had sabotaged their daughter's wedding out of jealousy. I received a certified letter from Michael and Kimberly requesting that I not contact them and stating that all outstanding vendor bills had been resolved without my assistance. The formal cold language made it clear that a lawyer had drafted it. I threw myself into my catering business, working longer hours than I had in years. The physical exhaustion of 14-hour days provided temporary relief from the emotional pain. My staff noticed my subdued demeanor, but respected my privacy, stepping up to handle more responsibilities as I moved through days in a fog of grief. My sister Eleanor checked on me daily, as did a few close friends who had witnessed what happened at the wedding. Their support was a lifeline, but couldn't fill the Michael-shaped hole in my heart. 3 weeks after the wedding, I returned home from a large corporate event to find a plain brown package leaning against my front door. No return address, no note. Inside was a USB drive. Curious and cautious, I plugged it into my computer. It contained a single video file. Footage from the wedding reception, clearly taken by someone with access to the professional videographer's equipment. I hesitated, then clicked play. The video showed the confrontation between Kimberly and me from an angle I hadn't seen, one that captured not just our interaction, but the reactions of the guests nearby. I watched again as Kimberly told me I wasn't welcome as Michael stood silently by. But now I could also see the shocked expressions on guests' faces, the uncomfortable glances exchanged, the way Kimberly's own mother closed her eyes briefly in what looked like embarrassment. The video continued past my departure, showing the ripple effect through the reception. Guests whispering, Michael looking lost, Kimberly quickly composing herself and pulling him toward the cake cutting as if nothing had happened. I wasn't sure who had sent me this footage or why, but it provided a strange comfort to see that others had recognized the injustice of what had happened. I wasn't crazy or oversensitive. The bride really had behaved abominably, and people had noticed. The following afternoon, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, I was surprised to find James Michael's best friend since college standing on my porch. I hadn't seen him since the wedding where he'd served as best man. "Mrs. Parker," he said awkwardly. "Sorry to drop by unannounced. Can I talk to you for a minute?" I invited him in and made coffee, noting how nervous he seemed. "Michael doesn't know I'm here," he blurted as soon as we sat down. "He'd probably never speak to me again if he found out." "I appreciate your discretion then," I said. "What's on your mind, James?" He fidgeted with his coffee cup. I've been friends with Michael for 10 years. You've always been so kind to me, treating me like family when I couldn't go home for holidays. What happened at the wedding? It wasn't right." "Thank you for saying that," I said softly. "There's more you should know." James took a deep breath. "This isn't the first time Kimberly has done something like this. In the year they've been together, she's systematically cut Michael off from most of his friends. Anyone who questions her gets frozen out." This wasn't entirely surprising given what I'd witnessed, but it was painful confirmation of my fears. "And there's a rumor," James hesitated. "I don't have proof, but several people in our circle believe Kimberly was still seeing her ex Brad right up until the engagement, maybe even after." I absorbed this news with a mix of heartbreak for Michael and grim vindication of my instincts about Kimberly. "Why are you telling me this, James?" "Because Michael might need a way back when this all falls apart," he said simply. "And I wanted you to know that some of us see what's really happening." After James left, I sat in my kitchen for a long time processing everything. The video showing guests' reactions, James's revelations about Kimberly's pattern of isolation and possible infidelity. It all painted a picture of a relationship built on control and manipulation rather than love and partnership. I didn't take any action with this information. It wasn't my place to interfere in my adult son's marriage, no matter how troubled it might be. I had set my boundary by refusing to continue funding a wedding where I was unwelcome. Now I needed to step back and let Michael navigate his own path. 4 days later, as I was closing up my catering kitchen after a small event, my phone rang with Michael's number. My heart raced as I answered. "Hello." "Mom." His voice sounded broken, nothing like the angry young man who had confronted me at Eleanor's. "Can I come see you?" "Of course," I said immediately. "Are you okay?" "No," he said simply. "I'm really not." 30 minutes later, Michael was sitting at my kitchen table looking utterly defeated. He'd lost weight in the month since the wedding, and dark circles underlined his eyes. "I should have defended you," were his first words. "At the wedding. I should have said something when Kimberly spoke to you that way. I've replayed that moment 1,000 times, and every time I hate myself more for staying silent." "What changed?" I asked gently. He laughed, a hollow sound with no humor in it. "James showed me the video. Someone sent it to him anonymously, seeing it from the outside, seeing my own cowardice." He shook his head. "And then last week I saw Kimberly do the same thing to a catering server at a charity event. Just eviscerate this poor girl for bringing the wrong appetizer. The same cold cruelty, the same entitlement. I suddenly saw her clearly, maybe for the first time." I waited, sensing there was more. I started noticing other things too. How she checks my phone, how she criticizes my clothes, my friends, my job, how she talks about your catering business like it's some cute little hobby instead of the successful company you built from nothing. He looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed. And then yesterday I found credit card statements she'd been hiding, thousands of dollars of debt on top of what we had to pay to cover the wedding vendors, and a hotel charge from 3 weeks before our wedding, with her ex-boyfriend's name on the room service bill. My heart broke for him. "Oh, Michael, I've been such a fool, Mom. I let her isolate me from everyone who really cares about me. I let her treat you horribly after all you've done for me. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed you to know that I see it now. I see all of it." I reached across the table and took his hand. "I forgave you the moment it happened, sweetheart. I was hurt and disappointed, but I never stopped loving you." "I've moved out," he said. "Staying with James for now. I've contacted a lawyer about the marriage. It's over." We talked for hours that night, really talked in a way we hadn't in over a year, about how he'd been swept up in Kimberly's glamorous world and promises of social advancement, about how he'd ignored red flags because he was infatuated with her beauty and status, about how he'd failed to stand up for himself and for me. "I don't know what happens next," he admitted as the conversation wound down around midnight. "Everything I thought my life was going to be has fallen apart." "You rebuild," I told him, "one day at a time, and you're not alone." When Michael left that night, our relationship was far from healed. Trust had been broken that would take time to restore, But a door had opened, allowing the possibility of a new, perhaps eventually stronger connection based on mutual respect rather than just familial obligation. I went to bed that night feeling lighter than I had in months. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I had stood my ground when it mattered. I had demonstrated to my son, and to myself, that love doesn't mean accepting mistreatment. Sometimes love means having the courage to say, no more. 6 months after the wedding day disaster, my life had found a new rhythm. The catering business was thriving after landing a contract with a major tech company that had opened offices downtown. I had hired 2 new full-time staff members and expanded our service offerings to include corporate team-building cooking classes. Michael's divorce was proceeding, though not without drama. Kimberly had contested it initially, then switched to demanding an exorbitant settlement when she realized Michael wouldn't reconcile. Her true colors continued to show in increasingly ugly ways, validating Michael's decision to end the marriage. After staying with James for several weeks, Michael had found a small apartment not far from my house. Our relationship was healing gradually through regular Sunday dinners, now a relaxed affair with honest conversation rather than performance or pretense. Sometimes Eleanor joined us, or James, or other friends who had remained loyal through the turmoil. Michael was in therapy, working through how he had allowed himself to be so thoroughly manipulated and isolated. "I'm learning to recognize red flags," he told me, "and to trust my instincts when something feels wrong." I had started therapy too, examining my own patterns of self-sacrifice and conflict avoidance that had contributed to the wedding situation. My therapist helped me recognize that my desire to make Michael happy had sometimes crossed into enabling behavior that wasn't actually healthy for either of us. On a practical level, Michael insisted on repaying me for the wedding expenses I had covered. I initially refused, but he was adamant. "It's not about the money, Mom. It's about taking responsibility for my choices." We eventually agreed on a manageable monthly amount that would take years to repay fully, but the symbolism mattered more than the sum. One of the most unexpected developments came through my catering business. A lifestyle magazine had been covering the tech company's office opening and was impressed by our food service. They asked to feature my business in an article about female entrepreneurs over 50. The piece ran with a beautiful photo of me in my catering kitchen and told the story of how I had built the company as a widow supporting my son. The publicity brought new clients and opportunities, including an invitation to cater a prestigious charity gala. As I was overseeing the event setup, I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Laverne, is that you?" I turned to find Diane Dawson, Kimberly's mother, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Hello, Diane," I said neutrally. "What can I do for you?" "I didn't know you were catering this event," she said. "You've done well for yourself." "Thank you. Was there something specific you needed?" She glanced around to ensure no one was listening. "I wanted to apologize, actually, for the wedding, for not stepping in when Kimberly spoke to you that way. It was unacceptable." This was the last thing I had expected. "I appreciate that." "Kimberly has always been challenging," Diane continued. "We indulged her too much, made excuses for her behavior. Seeing what she's put Michael through with this divorce, well, it's opened our eyes to patterns we should have addressed years ago." I nodded, unsure what to say. This woman had stood by while her daughter humiliated me, had supported Kimberly's narrative afterward, had threatened legal action. "I don't expect forgiveness," Diane said, seeming to read my thoughts. "I just wanted you to know that not everyone in our family condones what happened." As she walked away, I felt a surprising sense of closure. Diane's apology didn't erase what had happened, but it validated my experience and suggested that perhaps there were consequences for Kimberly's behavior in her own family circle as well. The following weekend, Michael brought a date to Sunday dinner. Leanne, a kindergarten teacher he had known casually for years but recently reconnected with. She was warm, unpretentious, and genuinely interested in hearing stories about Michael's childhood. When I mentioned my catering business, she asked thoughtful questions about how I had started it and what challenges I'd faced. "Your mom is amazing," she told Michael at one point, with an admiration that was refreshingly sincere. "Building a business while raising you alone couldn't have been easy." The contrast with Kimberly was stark and healing. Here was a woman who saw value in hard work and character rather than status and appearance. After they left, I sat on my porch with a glass of wine, reflecting on the journey of the past year. From the excitement of Michael's engagement through the stress and disappointment of the wedding planning, the devastation of the wedding day itself, and now the gradual rebuilding of both our lives. I thought of the moment I had decided to cancel those wedding payments, a split-second choice that had changed everything. Had it been petty? Perhaps partly. But it had also been necessary, a line drawn after too many boundaries had been crossed. Sometimes the hardest decisions are the most important ones. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "Thanks for dinner, Mom. Leanne thinks you're great. So do I." Such a simple message, but one that brought tears to my eyes. We were finding our way back to each other, not as the mother and child we had been, but as adults who chose to be in each other's lives based on mutual respect and love. The painful wedding day had ultimately given us both something valuable. Michael had gained clarity about the kind of relationship he deserved, and I had reclaimed my sense of self-worth. Sometimes, gifts come in unexpected, even painful packages. I've learned that loving someone doesn't mean accepting mistreatment, that setting boundaries isn't selfish, and that standing up for yourself isn't vindictive. These are lessons that came at a high cost, but they've changed my life for the better. If you're struggling with family dynamics where your worth isn't recognized, know that it's never too late to advocate for yourself. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to protect your dignity, even at the risk of damaging an important relationship? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more real-life experiences. And share this video with someone who might need to hear that they deserve respect too. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply say, enough.